show for you tonight, beginning with something you're not going to see anywhere else. My exclusive interview with the man who's at the center of the Russian investigation and featured in that fake Hillary-funded dossier. Carter Page is here. He's the former Trump advisor the FBI surveilled and the subject of that FISA memo. Page will react to the memo in his first interview since its release. And he's going to explain what he was doing on all those trips to Russia. But first, when Democrats cared about civil liberties, that's the focus of tonight's Angle. Since the Friday release of the GOP House Intel memo, Democrats and their lackeys in the lamestream media have been in overdrive, attacking on four fronts. First, they downplay the memo as a big nothing.
As the New Republic put it, quote, it would be easy to compare Nunes's memo to Geraldo Rivera opening Al Capone's vault.
I was surprised that it was such a flimsy document on its face.
The whole point here is not to be accurate. The point is to be misleading.
I don't think that there's much to the memo.
Now, for a memo that is supposedly a big dud, liberals are sure spending a lot of time trying to debunk it. Second, they charge that the memo's author, Devin Nunes, is a really bad actor. And did you know he's colluding with the White House?
I think the president was crystal clear, and I think that especially Chairman Nunes is doing his bidding.
I believe that this White House worked with Chairman Nunes to concoct this idea.
I think it's very possible his staff worked with the White House and coordinated the whole effort with the White House.
Now, that's a nice dodge. I love how they're trying to suggest that the memo is politically motivated while ignoring the facts in the memo that demonstrate that the entire Russia investigation was politically motivated from its inception. Devin Nunes' work to ensure the integrity of both the Clinton and the Mueller investigations should be welcomed by all Americans, whatever your political persuasion. And I'll tell you why. Because no one should be able to abuse or excuse the rule of law for political reasons. Governments cannot be allowed to target their political enemies. Well, they do it, though, don't they? In China and North Korea, and you bet, in Russia. My question is, what happened to accountability, holding government accountable? Third, the Democrats claim that Trump is going to use the memo to stop the Russia investigation and maybe even fire Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein, setting up a constitutional crisis.
If Rod Rosenstein was fired, could that trigger the worst constitutional crisis since President Nixon's Saturday Night Massacre?
If the president uses this fake, horrible release of distorted intelligence as an excuse to fire Acting Attorney General Rosenstein or Mueller, it could lead to a constitutional crisis.
I'll just tell you, this could precipitate a constitutional crisis.
I know there'd be a tremendous outcry. I know there'd be a constitutional crisis.
I mean, this redefines echo chamber, takes it to a new level. They pass around a memo in the morning. Okay, we're going to say cherry picked one day. Then we're going to go to constitutional crisis. Oh, my God. And I say, kids, take it easy. There's no evidence that Donald Trump is going to fire Rosenstein, despite, and I understand it, his displeasure with some of Rosenstein's stupid decisions, including signing off on one of those warrants to surveil Carter Page. But for just a moment, let's accept their silly scenario. Now, the firing of Rosenstein may trigger a political fracas, and maybe it would be unwise. I wouldn't do it. But the president surely has the constitutional authority to fire anyone in the executive branch. So I fail to exactly see how this would trigger a constitutional crisis. Finally, the Democrats insist that with the release of this memo, Trump and Nunes are putting the future of the entire FBI in jeopardy.
Trying to undermine the FBI and the Department of Justice is really not in the best interests of America.
The goal here is to undermine the FBI, discredit the Mueller investigation, do the president's bidding.
This
is a war on law. This is a war on justice. This is a war on the Justice Department. This is a war on the FBI.
Well, it's also a war on understatement, Joe. Now, who is carrying out a war against the reputation, integrity of the FBI, if anyone did? Well, I'd say it's former Obama AG Loretta Lynch, former Obama FBI Director Jim Comey, and former Obama Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, who waged war on the FBI by damaging its reputation. Now, how did they do that? Well, they put the FBI's future in jeopardy by eroding confidence in one of our treasured law enforcement institutions, because you cannot start spying on an American citizen as some kind of insurance policy against a presidential candidate you don't happen to like. In fact, you cannot surveil an American citizen based on falsified evidence at all, or by omitting a material fact in a FISA application for a warrant. But I'll tell you, the left just refuses to address the central point of the Nunes House Intel memo. I was thinking about this earlier today when I was hosting my radio show. Remember when Democrats used to care about protecting American civil liberties? Post 9/11, the ACLU warned about various ways the Bush administration was endangering the Bill of Rights. They warned about the Patriot Act and the growing surveillance society. By the way, I agree. And they sounded alarms over the weakening of the Freedom of Information Act by reclassifying documents as unclassified but sensitive. And the liberals even complained, and some other civil libertarians, about the fairness of these long no-fly lists. But this is my favorite part of this ACLU list of grievances, was number 8. Political spying. It was called political spying. Government agencies, including the FBI and the Department of Defense, have conducted their own spying on innocent and law-abiding Americans. Through the Freedom of Information Act, the ACLU learned the FBI had been consistently monitoring peaceful groups such as Quakers, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, Greenpeace, and the Arab American Anti-Defamation Committee, and indeed the ACLU itself. Well, PETA got surveilled, apparently, but I guess Carter Page and the Trump campaign just don't qualify for Fourth Amendment protections. The ACLU has been kind of silent. Now, there was a time when Democrats cared about things like FISA court abuses.
The FISA court process is one of the most one-sided approaches in American government. I know of no other court that doesn't have some kind of adversarial discussion where there are 2 points of view.
There should be some adversarial process, challenging it, questioning it, just as we do in the normal court.
The opinions themselves will benefit by having an adversarial process in key cases where the court has the benefit of hearing the other side, of seeing opposing case law.
Oh my gosh, my producer just said in my ear, look, he was on RT TV. Did you see that? That's great. Well, so they were all worried. Look at what could happen with the FISA court. But now, however, FISA is beyond reproach as long as it's used toward the ever noble goal of destroying Donald Trump, or preventing him back then of being president at all. Today on my radio show, Newt Gingrich agreed that a criminal investigation should be undertaken to discover how the FBI purposely misled the FISA court and may have obstructed justice in the Hillary email investigation.
I want to emphasize this. 98% of all FBI agents are honest, patriotic Americans trying to enforce the law, but they are tainted by the people at the very top who clearly were corrupt and were clearly violating the law. This will lead to a criminal investigation, and frankly, I don't understand why the Attorney General has not taken steps.
That's a great question. The question is, with Rod Rosenstein and as Deputy AG, could there ever really be a special counsel appointed to explore any of this? Or will it be up to Congress to find all the relevant documents and force his hand? Whatever happens, there is no doubt about the following. After all their years of claiming to be advocates for fairness and civil liberties, the Dems have been outed as frauds of the worst order. And that's the angle. In moments, we'll be joined by the man at the center of the revelations inside the Nunes memo, But first, who is Carter Page? And why did he become a target of the FISA court? Fox's Ed Henry joins us now from New York with more. Ed.
Laura, great to see you. Carter Page is almost the Forrest Gump in this whole tale. Keeps popping up everywhere. But after these many investigations, nobody can quite figure out what he did for the Trump campaign, let alone whether he did anything wrong. The key Forrest Gump moment came on March 21st, 2016, when then candidate Donald Trump appeared at a Washington Post edit board meeting. And the first question was about how he was going to finally reveal his foreign policy team. The context being it was hard for an anti-establishment candidate to get Republican foreign policy stalwarts on his team. So he wanted outside-the-box choices. The future president revealed only 5 names. One was he called George Papadopoulos an excellent guy and referred to another advisor simply as, quote, Carter Page, Ph.D., setting off a scramble over who this man of mystery was. Bloomberg News quickly noted the only real connection was they're both contrarians on Russia, wanting to work with Vladimir Putin in part because they believe policymakers in both parties are still clinging to a Cold War mindset. Ronald Reagan, in fact, sparked Page's interest in Russia at an early age after he saw Reagan on TV conducting arms control talks and noticed one of his advisors wearing a Navy uniform. The Gipper inspired him to enroll in the U.S. Naval Academy. He worked on arms control policy at the Pentagon, earned 3 graduate degrees, including that Ph.D. from the University of London. By 2000, he jumped into investment banking at Merrill Lynch. Because of a friendship with the Ukrainian billionaire, the firm had him open the Moscow office in 2004. For 3 years, he worked on deals with Russian state-owned energy companies. Fast forward to June 2013. Donald Trump was still on The Apprentice, and U.S. counterintelligence officials questioned Page about his contacts with a possible Russian spy, so he was on their radar before the campaign. During the campaign in July 2016, then campaign manager Corey Lewandowski reportedly approved Page's personal trip to Moscow, where he gave a speech criticizing U.S. policy toward Russia and met with Russian government officials. None of that necessarily nefarious. By September 2016, Page was out. And in fact, tonight, Donald Trump Jr. told Tucker that Page was not a real player and suggested he was more of a, quote, patsy. Though Page told the Senate Intel Committee last year he was a regular presence at Trump Tower. Even more curious, as we learned from Devin Nunes' memo, the FBI used the dossier to get a FISA warrant to listen in on Page's calls starting in October 2016, a month after we're told he left the campaign. And the surveillance was renewed several times deep into 2017 after he was gone. We noted this began at the March 2016 editorial board meeting with the Post, where George Papadopoulos has since pled guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russians. Carter Page has not been charged with anything. Laura?
Ed, thank you so much for that report. And joining us now from New York, we're pleased to welcome, in an exclusive, former Trump campaign advisor, Carter Page. Carter, it's good to see you tonight. I know you have not spoken out about this House Intel memo yet or the reaction to it. What is your reaction?
Well, my first reaction, Laura, when I saw it was, you know, there was a lot of details that kept dripping out, and it sounded really bad. And when I actually saw it, it was even worse than I could have possibly imagined. But then what was particularly interesting is sort of the next 48 hours after that, where part of the attack on Chairman Nunes and the committee was to come up with any new information to discredit me and anything related to the investigation or the overall investigation and all the great work that HIPSI's been doing. So it's pretty stark contrast between, you know, getting the facts out there and having, you know, still getting attacked. So it's pretty crazy.
This is what Donnie Trump said earlier tonight. Ed referred to the interview he did just a short while ago with Tucker Carlson. He was asked about you, and this is what he said.
This is a low-level person who worked in a campaign. This is someone who I've seen the emails where they said, well, this person's no longer working on the campaign. I believe one of my family members responded, who the heck is that individual? We'd never even heard of him. So to use that, again, as the basis to then try to attack the duly elected president, to do it then after that person's no longer even part of a campaign, all of these people kind of hang around. They're going to get their book deal. They want to be a part of something. So to utilize that person, I mean, they seem like a great patsy for that.
Your reaction to what Donnie says, you know, a low-level figure in the campaign. I don't think you ever have really disputed that, but your reaction.
Well, it was really impossible to help out in any way because, as you were alluding to, the attacks started almost immediately. Just anyone who had any connection or had ever done any work, positive or otherwise, in Russia was constantly sort of the #1 target for attack. So it was became a liability pretty quick. What I would say, though, is, Ed had sort of alluded to this early foreign policy committee. I was really impressed with a lot of the other people that were on the committee, and as he mentioned, there was a few names that were mentioned, but really the people that came on or in the early months were pretty incredible. And
but Carter, there was only one meeting, though, right? I mean, this was kind of slapped together in 24 hours. I talked to one of the people involved in it earlier tonight, and this was kind of thrown together really fast because, we got to have a list of people who are advising us. And this is when not a lot of people were helping out Trump in the spring of 2016. And so they came up with this list, and you guys had one meeting at the Trump International, I understood. But after that, there was no formal gatherings of this group. Is that correct?
That you actually raised an important point, Laura. I should have clarified. Correct one point that Ed had alluded to. That one meeting, I actually had previous.
You were in Hawaii.
I was in. Well, I haven't said where I was, but if that's
okay, sorry,
now,
you were in Hawaii.
If it's been real, okay.
Okay, but Carter, you know what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is you were put on this list, and your past work that you did in Russia, we'll get into that later, raised a red flag. And the FBI apparently had been watching you for some time, okay? So we fast forward to July, and you go to Moscow. You say you were invited to give a speech at a college there. Mm-hmm. When you went there, did you meet with government officials or people connected closely with Putin?
So
Yes
I gave a speech, and there was one senior government official who spoke after me. He was walking out of the building after he gave his speech, and we had a very brief conversation for less than 10 seconds. It was really a exchange of pleasantries. But a lot of the things he was talking about, you could tell there were positive opportunities on the horizon in terms of U.S.-Russia relations. So
was that Sechin? Was that Igor Sechin?
No, I've never met Sechin in my life.
So. So that's in the.
Yeah.
So just so people know, and I mean, I find this to be fascinating that in this fake dossier, there is an entire paragraph, and I believe it's on page 31, where it says that in terms of substance of their discussion, Igor Sechin, who is a very former KGB guy, president of Rosneft, the state-owned oil company, said that the Rosneft president was so keen to lift personal and corporate Western sanctions imposed on the company that he offered Page, Trump's associate, the brokerage of up to 19% privatized stake in Rosneft in return. And Page had expressed interest and confirmed that were Trump elected president, then sanctions on Russia would be lifted. That's right from the dossier, Carter. And I think a lot of people hear about the dossier, but they don't know what's in it. So you're saying tonight that you have never met Igor, I always forget his name, Sechin. You've never met him.
I've never met him in my entire life. And what's interesting about it, if you do the math on that, the 19% had a market value of about $11 billion. So if you think I'm going to get paid off some way, that seems like a pretty hefty sum.
That's pretty good. I'm going to borrow some money from you someday. Carter, hold right there. We have a lot more to talk about, and it's fun. It's actually fun to read through this dossier because it's like, woo, crazy stuff. And we're going to have more to talk about after this in a short break. Stay there.